I sat at my kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the window, casting a warm glow over the pile of bills that seemed to grow larger by the day. The faint sound of the clock ticking in the background created a rhythm that matched my thoughts, steady, almost reassuring. I glanced around the room, taking in the familiar sights, the floral curtains my mother had sewn, the framed photographs capturing moments of laughter and love with Bradley, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee that lingered in the air. In that quiet afternoon, everything felt almost perfect. Yet, that perfection was deceptive. As I sifted through the envelopes, my mind drifted to Bradley. He was at work, probably deep in a project that required his full attention. I felt pride swell in my chest whenever I thought of his dedication and ambition. We had built a life together, one filled with dreams and plans for the future. I often imagined our cozy home, filled with the pitter-patter of little feet, laughter echoing through the halls. But for reasons I couldn't quite grasp, an unsettling feeling crept into my mind, clouding that idyllic vision with doubt. Just as I was about to dismiss my worries, my phone vibrated on the table, the sound slicing through the calm like a knife. I glanced at the screen, half expecting a mundane message from Bradley about dinner plans or his day. Instead, I was met with a message that made my heart drop, a text from Bradley to Clara, our best friend, containing the word love. The room spun around me, the walls closing in his confusion and disbelief washed over me like a cold wave. My breath quickened, and I clutched the edge of the table, steadying myself against the overwhelming tide of emotions that threatened to engulf me. How could this be happening? My mind raced with questions as I replayed the moments we had shared. The laughter, the inside jokes, the late-night talks that seemed to solidify our bond. I had trusted both of them completely. Clara, with her infectious smile and unwavering support, had been my confidant through thick and thin. The thought of betrayal felt like a physical blow, the kind that knocked the wind out of you and left you gasping for air. My heart ached, a dull throb that grew sharper with each passing moment. In the midst of my spiraling thoughts, I felt a surge of determination rising within me. I needed answers. I couldn't let this confusion fester, like a wound left untreated. I envisioned confronting Bradley, demanding he explain the inexplicable. My stomach churned at the thought of facing him, but I couldn't allow fear to paralyze me. The silence that hung between us in that moment felt unbearable, as if it was a chasm that threatened to swallow me whole. Taking a deep breath, I stood up, my legs shaking slightly as I made my way to the living room. Each step felt heavy, weighted down by the gravity of what I was about to confront. I could hear the faint sound of Bradley's voice in the background, and as I approached, the tension in the air thickened, wrapping around me like a suffocating cloak. I hesitated at the doorway, my heart racing, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The reality of the betrayal loomed large, and I knew that this moment would change everything. With my heart pounding in my chest, I stepped into the room, my eyes locking onto Bradley. His surprise was palpable, and for a fleeting second, I wondered if he could see the storm brewing within me. Yet, as I opened my mouth to speak, the weight of his silence spoke volumes. The truth hung heavy in the air, and I knew that whatever was about to unfold would shatter the life we had built together. I braced myself, knowing that the innocence of our love was about to be irrevocably tainted by the shadows of betrayal. The dim light of the late afternoon sun filtered through the windows, casting shadows that danced on the walls of my living room. It felt surreal, sitting there surrounded by the ghosts of happier times, memories that now felt like cruel jokes played at my expense. My heart raced as I sat at my desk, the glow of Bradley's phone illuminating the dark corners of my mind. I pulled up his social media accounts, my fingers trembling slightly as I scrolled through pictures that once brought joy, but now felt like daggers piercing through my chest. With each click of the mouse, I delved deeper into a world I thought I knew. I had always trusted Bradley, had believed in the love we shared, but there it was, laid bare before me. A string of messages that revealed an intimacy I had never imagined existed outside our relationship. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I read each message, each emoji, each laugh shared between them, hidden behind the facade of friendship. The vibrant images of their smiles together twisted into grotesque reminders of my betrayal. How could he? How could they? The questions spiraled in my mind, each one more suffocating than the last. I opened his text messages, my heart pounding as I scrolled through conversations filled with flotation and longing. I wanted to scream, to shatter the silence that enveloped me, but instead, I was ensnared by a suffocating sense of betrayal. I could hardly breathe as I pieced together the fragments of their secret meetings, the late-night phone calls I had mistakenly attributed to work or a late-night game with friends. The truth was a bitter pill to swallow, coated with the sweet memories of our life together. As I leaned back in my chair, the weight of despair settled like a heavy cloak around my shoulders. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to drift into the past, where laughter echoed in the halls of my mind. I could see us dancing in the living room, the music playing softly as we spun each other around, lost in a world that felt invincible. Clara had always been there, a constant in our lives, sharing in our joys and sorrows. Now those memories felt tainted, corrupted by the knowledge of her betrayal. In the quiet solitude of my home, I felt utterly alone. The people I had loved and trusted had turned into strangers, and the home I had built with Bradley felt like a prison. I could not escape the torment of my thoughts, the images of them together clawing at my heart. I stood up, pacing the room as anger bubbled beneath the surface, threatening to erupt. It was a visceral pain, raw and consuming, and I needed a plan. I needed to confront them, to expose their treachery and reclaim my life. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over everything, but all I could see was darkness. I grabbed my coat, the fabric cool against my skin, and stepped outside. I felt the chill in the air, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I had made a decision. I would confront them, not just for myself, but for the woman I used to be, the woman who deserved better than this. I had to find them, to witness their betrayal firsthand, to see the truth for myself. As I made my way to the cafe, my heart raced with anticipation and dread. Each step felt like a march toward a confrontation I had long dreaded, yet desperately needed. The cafe came into view, a quaint little place filled with laughter and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Through the glass, I could see them, sitting together, their heads tilted close as they shared a laugh. My breath caught in my throat, and I hesitated for a moment, the reality of what I was about to do crashing over me like a tidal wave. I stood there, heart pounding, feeling like an intruder in my own life. They were so immersed in each other that they had no idea I was watching, no idea that their laughter was a dagger to my heart. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a mix of anger and heartbreak. I was no longer the woman who had stood by them. I was a force to be reckoned with. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself for the confrontation that would shatter their world as mine had been shattered. This was my moment of truth, the moment I would reclaim my power and confront the betrayal that had turned my life upside down. The air inside the cafe was thick and suffocating, a stark contrast to the cheerful clinking of cups and the soft hum of conversations that surrounded me. I felt as if I had stepped into a nightmare, a cruel distortion of my reality, where laughter and joy danced mockingly around me while I stood at the precipice of my own shattered world. With each step I took toward the table where Bradley and Clara sat, oblivious to the storm brewing within me, my heart pounded louder, drowning out the ambient noise. As I approached, I could see them leaning close, their faces painted with a familiarity that made bile rise in my throat. Bradley's hand brushed against Clara's, a simple gesture that felt like a dagger thrust into my chest. I had spent years building a life with this man, and here he was, treating my best friend as if she were the only person in the room. The betrayal felt like a living entity, wrapping its tendrils around my heart, squeezing tighter with every passing second. I could feel the burning in my eyes, the heat of unshed tears threatening to spill over. But I refused to let them see my pain. This moment was not about them. It was about me reclaiming my truth. Without a second thought, I pushed through the door and stormed into the cafe, each footfall echoing the tumult of emotions inside me. The laughter and conversations faded into a deafening silence as heads turned to watch the spectacle unfold. I locked eyes with Bradley, and for a split second, his expression morphed from surprise to a flash of guilt. Clara, on the other hand, wore a mask of confusion, her brows knitting together as she grasped the reality of my intrusion. I stood before them, my chest heaving with a mix of rage and heartbreak. My voice trembled with emotion as I confronted them, demanding to know how they could betray me so casually, as if our years of friendship and love meant nothing. The incredulity on their faces only fueled the fire within me. How could they be so thoughtless? How could they laugh and share moments while I stood in the shadows, oblivious to the unraveling of my life? Bradley opened his mouth to speak, the words struggling to escape his lips, but all I could see was the man I thought I knew, crumbling under the weight of his lies. He began to stammer out justifications, revealing insecurities I had never known existed. The cracks in his facade were becoming evident, and with each word, I felt a strange mixture of anger and pity wash over me. He spoke of doubts, of feeling lost, and I couldn't help but wonder how he could have felt so alone when I was right there, always ready to support him. But Clara, oh Clara, as I watched her shift in her seat, her concern seemed to lie more with her image than the devastation she had wrought. I could see the flicker of self-preservation in her eyes, a desperate attempt to maintain some semblance of control in a situation spiraling into chaos. It was infuriating. She had played the role of the loyal friend while secretly undermining my happiness, and now, faced with the consequences, she was more worried about her reputation than the pain she had inflicted. The confrontation escalated, the cafe patrons turning their attention toward us, eyes wide with disbelief. I felt the heat of their stares, but I was beyond caring. This was my moment, the moment I had needed to reclaim my narrative from the ashes of betrayal. I unleashed the hurt and fury that had been building inside me, letting it spill out like a torrent. I spoke of trust and loyalty, of the years we had spent together, and how easily they had dismantled everything with their selfish choices. As I revealed the full extent of their betrayal, the room seemed to hold its breath. I could see the shock ripple through the crowd, the whispers of disbelief rising like a wave. Each word I spoke was a catharsis, a release of the pent-up anguish that had become my constant companion. They had thought they could take my love for granted, assumed that I would remain in the shadows while they danced in the spotlight. But I was done being invisible. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of empowerment wash over me. I was no longer the victim of their betrayal. I was the one in control, and they were left scrambling for excuses, their faces a mix of guilt and disbelief. The cafe had transformed from a backdrop of laughter to a stage for my truth, and I would not back down. I would ensure that the world knew what they had done to me, and I would emerge stronger from the ashes of this betrayal. I stood in the quiet of my living room, the echo of my confrontation with Bradley and Clara still reverberating in my mind. The shock of their betrayal had morphed into a simmering anger, intertwining with a strange sense of empowerment. I felt the weight of their lies pressing against my chest, but instead of suffocating me, it ignited a fire within. I was no longer just the betrayed. I was the one who would take control of the narrative. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the walls, and I paced restlessly, my thoughts racing. Revenge, I realized, could be a dish best served cold, and I was more than willing to prepare a feast. My mind began to swirl with ideas on how to expose their betrayal, not just to me, but to everyone who believed in the facade they had built. I envisioned the look on Clara's face when she realized that her carefully orchestrated lies would crumble before an audience. The thought sent a thrill through me. I reached for my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the names of my closest friends, those who knew me well enough to understand the turmoil I was experiencing. I tapped on a name and sent a message, proposing we meet. I needed allies, people who would support me in this plan. I envisioned a surprise birthday party for Clara, a gathering that would be the perfect stage for unveiling the truth. It wasn't merely about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my narrative. The next day, we convened at a coffee shop, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of roasted beans. My friends listened intently as I outlined my plan, and their faces reflected a mix of concern and excitement. They understood the delicate balance between support and the potential fallout. Still, as I spoke, I could see their resolve strengthening. They were on my side, ready to help me orchestrate this moment of truth. We spent hours planning every detail, from the guest list to the decorations. It was surreal to think that just a few days ago, I was a woman lost in heartbreak, and now I was plotting the unveiling of a betrayal. The anticipation of the party grew, and with it, my emotions fluctuated wildly. Some moments, I was consumed by anger. Others, I felt a rush of hope. Would this truly bring closure, or was it just a way to prolong my suffering? I couldn't help but rehearse what I would say, standing in front of a crowd that had once celebrated the friendship between us. As the party date approached, I found myself standing before the mirror, rehearsing my speech. I practiced the cadence of my voice, imagining the shocked expressions of my friends when the truth spilled from my lips. I envisioned Clara, her laughter frozen in an instant, and Bradley's face contorting from confusion to horror. Would they try to defend themselves? Would they attempt to downplay the severity of their actions? I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was my moment. Each evening leading up to the party, I found solace in my friends' company, sharing laughter and stories that momentarily distracted me from the storm brewing inside. They reminded me of my strength, of the woman I was before the betrayal, and I began to feel a flicker of my old self returning. But as the day of the party loomed closer, I could sense the weight of anticipation growing heavier. The closer it got, the more palpable my anxiety became. Was I truly ready to face them? To face the reality of what had happened? Then it hit me, the realization that this was not just about them. It was about me reclaiming my narrative, my truth. I was ready. I would stand in that room, and I would reveal their betrayal to everyone who had once believed in the sanctity of our friendship. My heart raced as I envisioned the moment, and for the first time since discovering the affair, I felt a sense of purpose. No longer would I be a woman defined by loss. I would be the woman who turned betrayal into strength, rewriting my story with each word I would speak. As the night of the party arrived, I stood in front of the mirror, my reflection revealing a mask of confidence that belied the turmoil inside me. My heart raced, a chaotic mix of excitement and dread swirling within. I adjusted my dress, a deep shade of red that felt both empowering and dangerously provocative. I could almost hear the laughter of friends gathering in the other room, their voices a distant hum that contrasted sharply with the storm brewing in my mind. Clara, blissfully unaware of the tempest approaching, was enjoying the festivities, mingling among our friends, radiant and carefree. Every laugh I heard from the other side of the door felt like a dagger to my heart, each one a reminder of the betrayal I had unearthed. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was the moment I had been planning for, the moment where I would finally reclaim my narrative. I had rehearsed my speech countless times, the words rolling off my tongue in a symphony of righteous anger and poignant memories. I wanted to expose the truth, not just for myself, but for everyone caught in the web of deception that Clara and Bradley had spun. As I stepped out into the living room, the atmosphere was electric. A vibrant tapestry of friends gathered to celebrate Clara's birthday. They smiled and raised their glasses, a chorus of well wishes enveloping her in a cocoon of joy. I felt like an outsider on the brink of crashing a party, my heart pounding louder than the music. I waited for the perfect moment, watching as Clara basked in the attention, her laughter ringing like a bell, innocent and unassuming. Then it came, the moment when the chatter faded, and all eyes turned toward me as I raised my glass. The silence was thick, pregnant with anticipation. I felt the weight of their gazes, a thousand questions hanging in the air. I took a deep breath, my voice steadying as I began to speak. I wove memories into my words, recalling times when Clara and I shared laughter, moments when I thought we were unbreakable. I painted a picture of friendship forged in trust, only to expose the cracks that had formed beneath the surface. As I spoke, I could see Clara's smile faltering, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. Each word I uttered felt like a release, a cathartic unburdening of all the pain I had harbored. I detailed the betrayal, the way I had uncovered Bradley's messages, the late-night whispers that shattered my world. The room was silent, the shock palpable as my friends processed the revelation. Whispers erupted, a collective gasp of disbelief rippling through the crowd. I could see Bradley's face pale, his guilt radiating like a beacon, a tangible reminder of his infidelity. Clara's expression morphed from shock to horror, her facade crumbling before my eyes. The betrayal that had once seemed so intimate, so personal to me, was now laid bare for everyone to witness. I felt a surge of power, a bittersweet victory coursing through my veins. Her laughter had once been a source of comfort, but now it felt like a betrayal echoing in the silence that followed my words. The atmosphere shifted, the air thick with tension as the reality of the moment settled over us like a heavy fog. I watched as Clara's friends began to distance themselves, some turning their backs, unable to reconcile the image of the woman they celebrated with the truth I had unveiled. The camaraderie that had once enveloped us was now replaced by a chasm of betrayal and disbelief. Bradley stood frozen, his eyes darting between Clara and me, the weight of his actions crashing down like a tidal wave. I felt an odd mix of pity and satisfaction. He had chosen this path, believing he could have it all without consequence. In that moment, I realized that I was no longer the victim of their betrayal. I was reclaiming my narrative, asserting my strength in the face of their deception. I had turned the tide, and as the whispers grew louder, I felt the chains of their betrayal begin to loosen. I was ready to step into a new chapter of my life, one where I would no longer be defined by their actions, but by my resilience and ability to rise above it all. In the aftermath of the revelation, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sorrow. I watched Clara, once vibrant and filled with laughter, now reduced to a shadow of her former self, shunned by friends who had once adored her. Her laughter, which had echoed through countless gatherings, was now silenced, replaced by whispers and sidelong glances. I stood at a distance, observing her as she wandered through the crowd, desperately trying to cling to the remnants of her social life. But she was met with cold shoulders and hushed conversations. I felt a pang of satisfaction, a sense of bittersweet justice that coursed through me. The very people she had taken for granted were now the ones who turned away, and for the first time, I understood the weight of her betrayal, not just against me, but against the friendships she had so carelessly disregarded. Bradley, on the other hand, was a different story. He was left standing alone, the weight of his actions bearing down on him like a leaden blanket. I could see the guilt etched into his features, the way he ran his hands through his hair in frustration and despair. He had once been my partner, my confidant, and now he stood as a shell of the man I thought I knew. I felt an odd sense of detachment. The anger that had fueled my resolve was slowly fading, replaced by an unsettling calm. I had confronted them, exposed their deceit, and yet witnessing their downfall evoked a sadness I hadn't anticipated. It was as if I were watching a tragic play unfold, where the characters I had loved were now engulfed in their own turmoil. As the days turned into weeks, I began the arduous process of rebuilding my life. I focused on healing, on rediscovering myself outside the confines of my marriage. It was during this time of solitude that I unexpectedly reconnected with an old friend, Mark. We had known each other from college, sharing laughter and dreams over coffee and late-night study sessions. In the aftermath of my heartbreak, he reached out, offering support that felt genuine and warm. There was a tenderness in his eyes that made me feel seen, something I hadn't felt in a long time. As we spent time together, the initial comfort of friendship flourished into something deeper. Mark listened without judgment, providing me a safe space to express my fears, my hopes, and my lingering pain. It was refreshing to be seen through a lens of respect and admiration rather than betrayal. With each passing day, I felt the chains of my past begin to loosen. I found myself laughing again, the sound echoing in my home like a long-forgotten melody. Mark's presence was a balm for my wounded heart, and I could feel the stirrings of new love beginning to blossom. But just as I was beginning to feel a sense of normalcy, a chilling realization washed over me. The more I learned about Claire's actions, the clearer it became that she had been manipulating Bradley's insecurities all along. The affair was not a mere coincidence. It was a calculated move on her part. She had exploited his vulnerabilities to fulfill her own desires, and the thought of it ignited a fire within me once more. I realized that if I was going to reclaim not just my life but also my narrative, I needed to confront her once again. With resolve, I sought Clara out, a sense of purpose coursing through me. I needed her to understand the depth of her betrayal, not just to me, but to herself. When I finally stood before her, I could see the remnants of her former confidence crumbling. I laid bare the truth of her manipulation, detailing how she had twisted Bradley's insecurities to orchestrate their affair. The look in her eyes shifted from defiance to fear, and I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of my own fate. As I walked away from that confrontation, I felt lighter, as if the shadows of betrayal had finally lifted. I emerged victorious, reclaiming my life and stepping into a future filled with hope and strength. I was free from the chains of deceit and betrayal that had once bound me. With Mark by my side, I felt ready to embrace the new chapter that awaited me, one where love, respect, and authenticity reigned supreme.